Okay, so as you can see on the right hand side, we have the actual HTML code, and this is Visual Studio Code Editor. We are going to be using this. I'll talk about this in next video when we actually start off typing with the code. But as you can see, we have our index.html file, and the same file is actually running on the browser. You can see file, users, and then the entire directory. And as you can see, we have our title, my HTML document. So this is that title. Then inside the body, we have our first heading h1. So you can see that heading is written, so this is a text. Then we have individual two divisions, which of course cannot be seen, but inside those we have paragraphs. And the first paragraph we have p tag 1, so that's visible over here, and p tag 2. So this is visually what I wanted to show you. Now let's get back to the digital blackboard again. Okay, so now that you've seen the actual HTML web page load on the browser, coming back to our original question, how does JavaScript understand this HTML document? So this is where that document object model comes into picture, and let me show you that DOM entire model. Okay, so what happens is when the HTML document is loaded in the browser, corresponding to that document, another representation of that document is created, which is known as the document object model, aka DOM. Now this JS view represents something, I'll tell you. So what happens is each of these tags, that is HTML, head, title, are correspondingly represented as objects in the document object model. Hence the name object model. And since it is a document, this is a HTML document which is loaded onto the browser, right? And corresponding to this, we have another representation which is the DOM. So that's why it's a document. And each of these tags are represented as objects. So that's why document object. And since there is a hierarchy, you can see that the entire HTML document comprises of a hierarchy, right? We have HTML, which is the top node. Inside that we have head and body. Inside the head we have title, and then inside the body we have again h1, first division and second division. So there is a proper hierarchy, right? We also saw that in the code indentation. So similarly, the same hierarchy is also created over here in the document object model, and hence the term model. So comprising of 3 words, document object model, is basically just a representation of the same HTML document in a different format. Now the reason why we require a different format is because JavaScript can easily interpret this format. JavaScript cannot understand these tags, but JavaScript can easily understand these objects. So this is where JavaScript can now actually use these objects to manipulate their attributes. Since both these things are one and the same thing, so there is no separate document, it's just a different way of representing. JavaScript can now access each of these objects using different functions, which we'll of course see in future videos, and then you can manipulate each of the attributes of these objects. For example, if you want to change the text inside the title, you can easily access this title object in JavaScript by accessing the document object model, and then you can change the text inside the title. Similarly, you can change the size, you can add color, you can add background to heading tag, to division, to paragraph, you can change the text, you can hide the text, you can animate the text, and you can do everything on this document object model using JavaScript. So the way it works is JavaScript looks at this document object model in terms of nodes. Okay, so the concept of nodes is used over here, and there are many nodes, but primarily we are going to be looking at 3 different types of nodes. So let me just show you what these nodes are. So these are the 3 different types of nodes. Number 1 is element node. So this is number 1. Number 2 is attribute node. This is number 2. And number 3 is text node. So again, a little bit of hierarchy is going on over here. You can see that at the top level we have the element, that is the tag itself, right? So the head tag, which is over here in HTML format, is represented as an object over here. So everything in rectangular boxes is represented as an object. And for those who don't know object-oriented programming, or who have never even studied object-oriented programming, basically an object is something which has an attribute as well as a method or function which can operate on that attribute. Even though it sounds vague, you'll understand it when we actually go ahead in the programming part. So don't worry about that. So yes, this yellow box is the element node. The next in hierarchy is the attribute node. So now you can see that in the HTML form, this division has an ID of div1, right? We have given this ID div1. So this ID is basically the attribute of that division. Even in HTML, we call it as attribute, right? We have ID, we have class, we can add style, and so on and so forth. So these are the attributes. So this attribute node corresponds to this ID, and using this attribute node, JavaScript can access this ID to access this element and then perform manipulations. And the last node is the text node, which is basically the content inside the element. So in this case, in this blue box, you can see that this my title is actually the text inside the title tag, right? So this title is an element because it is a tag over here, but inside that tag, you can see that we have some actual text. So that's why you can see this my title is not actually inside a square box, because it is not an object, it is some attribute, or you can say it is a property. It is a value, right? So you can change this my title using JavaScript by accessing the text node. So these are the three basic nodes that we're going to be dealing with when we actually try to manipulate the DOM objects. So you can call them as DOM objects because JavaScript looks at HTML document in this document object model form only, because it can only operate on objects and it cannot directly access these tags. So yeah, this was it for this video. I just wanted to talk about document object model because this is a very fundamental topic which, if you're a beginner, you definitely need to know, and you need to know how JavaScript actually looks at a HTML document and how it performs manipulations using different nodes.